Well, joining me now from the UK is Alex Magaisa. He's a former advisor to opposition leader Morgan Tsvangirai and a lecturer at the University of Kent. And here in the studio with me is TRT World's Fidelis Mba. He has reported in the region and has been following this story very closely. Okay, we all are aware how historic these protests are, but I want to better gauge how much they genuinely reflect the will of a majority of Zimbabweans. Fidelis, let me start with you.
Well, it's actually true that the support base of President Mugabe has waned over, in the last few years, which even points to the fact that why there's actually a faction, among the ZANU-PF, his party, which is now divided between the wife and the vice president. So, and because of the economic crisis in the country, this amount of support he had over the years, which meant even if he said anything, no matter what, people from, the opposition said, people would never really listen to them. He would always have his way. But things are gradually changing. But that doesn't mean that he has lost base. Forget about, the campaigns, the protests in Bulawayo, the protests in Harare. Yes, people are getting more politically conscious and aware of what's happening to them and what lies ahead for them, and people are yearning for change. Okay. But it's not that easy to just dismiss, Mugabe, especially if they're able to close ranks within the ZANU-PF. Okay.
Alex, do you think we are finally seeing the end of Mugabe's rule here?
Well, as Fidelis has said, this is a very important development in the political debate in Zimbabwe. Mr. Mugabe has faced serious opposition from the movement for democratic change for a number of years, from organized politics. But this is the first time that we are seeing people who are previously sitting on the fence, previously apolitical, people in the middle classes coming together and saying enough is enough. The economic challenges that Zimbabwe is facing at the moment, which means many young people who are being churned out of the universities don't have any jobs. The government itself is broke. It is unable to pay its workers. And they are now introducing what they call bond notes, which is some form of currency, which people don't trust, especially after the years of hyperinflation 8 years ago. As he rightly says, there have been protests in the cities of Harare. The urban population, people are becoming more politically conscious and more active and less fearful of speaking out. But of course, we must also remember the demographics of Zimbabwe, that 67% of the population lives in the rural areas, where Mugabe has traditionally, been a very strong figure. And, this social or citizens movement, which is largely based on social media and bringing together the urban population, has to penetrate those rural areas if there's going to be any serious and significant change in the next few months.
Right. Alex, they are protesting against the government here, but not necessarily in support of any real opposition, because many would argue there really is no proper political alternative to Robert Mugabe's party, to ZANU-PF.
Well, there have been a lot of disappointments with the opposition political parties in Zimbabwe, especially in the last 3 years after the controversial election of 2013, when many people were very hopeful that the movement for democratic change and Mr. Tsvangirai would succeed. Unfortunately, I was part of that election campaign. Things didn't go according to plan. We believe that the election was stolen, that it was rigged. And what we are facing at the moment are the costs of that electoral theft. It is easy to dismiss the opposition, but I do think that the movement for democratic change is still a very credible and strong political party.
How so?
They've been going.
I have to ask how so, because I know particularly the top members, including men like Arthur Mutambara, were fully co-opted by ZANU-PF. Nobody sees them as opposition now. They see them as part of Mugabe's party.
Well, I think there are various nuances to the opposition political parties in Zimbabwe. The main opposition political party is led by Mr. Tsvangirai. Mr. Mutambara was in another formation of the MDC. He has since moved out and is no longer active in the politics of Zimbabwe at the moment. I was going to say that President Mugabe split from one of his vice presidents, Mrs. Joyce Mujuru, who has now formed a political party, which at the weekend held a very symbolic joint rally with the Movement for Democratic Change. And all this has galvanized the opposition and hopefully shows that there is potential for the opposition parties to look over their differences and work together in order to confront a common opponent.
Fidelis, I'm curious as to how you see the opposition. You mentioned Joyce Mujuru just there, but some Zimbabweans see her as still part of ZANU-PF, only a disaffected member because she didn't get what she wanted out of ZANU-PF. She was put on the sidelines in favor of Grace Mugabe. Where do you think that opposition stands?
Well, contrary to what he said, I feel the opposition is also, divided, because before now it used to be just the movement for democratic change against the ZANU-PF. So they had a united opposition that was fighting Mugabe politically. Now you have Joyce Mujuru, who has been a minister since 1980. She's more than 60 years. Tsvangirai is more than 60 years. So to start with, they don't even represent the change that the young people are asking for. Because the young people, the middle class, the young graduates, they wouldn't be looking for someone who is already above 60 to come in now. Because one of the complaints is that Mugabe is too old. At 92, he's already old and he shouldn't be in power. Then would you want to bring someone who is also over 60? And then between both of them, who's going to step down for who? Morgan Tsvangirai wants to be president. Joyce wants to be president. That opposition, vote is already divided. Forget that, they had what looks like, a rally together. That is just, more like a political convenience for now. When it comes to the nitty-gritty of sharing positions, stepping down for people, you now discover that the opposition is not as united as people are, meaning to read into it. Because once Mugabe is able to settle the rift, within his party, you discover that the opposition might not be united enough to be able, even whether he is running or he decides to handpick someone else, it will still be a case of the ZANU-PF being the party to beat during the next general elections.
Alex, I wanted to get your take on Fidelis.
Well, I mean, with all due respect, look, we all understand. I engage with these people in Zimbabwe on a regular basis. I understand the point that Fidelis is making is a valid point. The opposition has been divided, and many of us who observe and engage with them have been encouraging and urging them to try and work together to form a coalition that would fight the common opponent. And the signs that we saw at the weekend, I don't think that it's fair to dismiss them as just convenience. I think it's the beginnings of a process of negotiating. Yes, it's going to be very difficult because they will fight for positions, but they have to look at the bigger picture and to see that what they are looking for is a situation where they will be able to go over the challenge that we have at the moment, which is having ZANU-PF in power. And ZANU-PF, frankly, does not have any solutions to the challenges that the country is facing at the moment. So I'm hopeful. I do have my concerns, which I echo, about the opposition being divided. And we've been encouraging them to say, as Zimbabweans who are willing for democracy and for change, you need to get over your differences, get over the fascination with positions, and try and look at the bigger picture and serve Zimbabwe well.
But Alex, let me ask you where you think the protests themselves are headed now. We've seen the protest leader, Pastor Mamorire, almost disappear from the scene, some would argue. He's kind of moved on to the United States. He's said that he thinks his life may be in danger in Zimbabwe, and some of his supporters have said, we've just lost our leader, and they've expressed their disappointment to him directly. If he's not there to rally these people, particularly by the social media you both referred to, what happens to the protests themselves?
No, absolutely. What has happened in the last few days has been a very destabilizing factor for the citizens movement. The challenge, of course, is that the citizens movement was never an organized force. It was people speaking out, and he did something incredible, which was to reawaken the spirits of the people, to make them more politically conscious, to allow them a voice to speak. But unfortunately, his abrupt departure departure to the US has sort of deflated spirits among a lot of other people. But I'm also motivated by the fact that a lot of people who are looking at it are saying, look, this was never about one person. This is about citizens, and therefore, people must carry on with the momentum that has, been built over the past few months. It's going to be very difficult because, a lot of people who were very hopeful and looking to him as a leader will have been disappointed by what has happened. But, the question is whether or not they can look beyond this, get themselves up and try and chart a new way forward. My point has always been that you cannot build a movement around an individual. You have to institutionalize. Eventually, you have to work with the organized political parties and civil society, the likes of Mr. Tsvangirai, the likes of Mrs. Mujuru and others, get together despite previous differences in order to chart a way forward. So it's really a big test for the people of Zimbabwe that they can rise from the challenge that they have faced in the last few days.
Okay, Fidelis, go ahead.
Yeah, like he did mention, it's a big test for the opposition because the movement is something that just came up out of nowhere. There wasn't like a proper structure. So, and this was like when the momentum was really building up properly, almost more like trying to set up a proper structure, and then he had to leave the country. Now it's going to be difficult trying to, first of all, identify that one person who will be able to bring them together. He was able to bring them together because of his power of oratory, because he was someone who had never been in politics, who people see as like a switch from the old guard, someone who is young, someone who can actually like also appeal to the younger generation who are mostly affected by especially the economic crisis. So right now the onus is on the opposition to be able to like look for that one person who will be able to galvanize support. But then getting that one person, how easy is it going to be for the opposition?
Okay, Fidelis, I'm going to let you have the last word. I'd like to thank both of our guests for joining us on The Newsmakers. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Alex Magaisa from the UK, Fidelis here in the studio. Thanks so much.